A fog descended on the lake, and I was lost on an alien ocean. I write this with the fleeting hope that someone, somewhere, will be able to help me make sense of it all. All I want are answers, some understanding that would allow me to return to my previous undisturbed worldview. That lake sitting just beyond the edges of my yard had seemed an extension of the home to me. Now I feel as though it looms over me at night, threatening to let loose the unknowable horrors it holds. Before I was lost in that place, I would take every opportunity to be down at the lake. The water was like a second home. Now it seems so alien and unfamiliar. I will recount my experience to the best of my ability, and all I ask, all I hope, is that someone can help me make sense of this. Please. I feel as though I can't trust my own reality, and the nightmares that fill what little sleep I have gotten have left me exhausted. My family had owned our home in the private community built around Lake Ganod in Massachusetts for longer than I'd been alive, and growing up I'd spent many summers there under the watchful eye of my mother or aunt from the docks. My cousins and I would challenge each other to races out into the lake, always pushing the limits to see who could swim out the farthest. I would always win. The water had become a second home to me, somewhere I found comfort and familiarity, and years later when my grandparents needed to move closer to my family, the house would come under my care. I'd lived there for years without incident, and I had intended for this to be the house I raised a family in one day. I intend to move now, as soon as I can manage. Every second spent here wears on my nerves, which are already shot to hell, and I can't take it. The sight of the lake. It was overcast the morning that it happened. Fresh drops of dew clung to the grass, which seemed a more lively green than usual thanks to the weather. The spring was practically upon us, though winter was not so far removed, and the stubborn chill that seemed to cling to the air reminded me as much. I shivered involuntarily, pulling the collar of my windbreaker together with one hand and shoved the other in a pocket as I moved through the backyard towards the private path that leads to the lake shore. Except for the birds chirping messages back and forth to each other, I was the only living thing out this early, which was just as I preferred it. I opened the fence that separated my backyard from the path down to the waterfront and made my way down the stone steps descending the little hill the house sat on and onto the sandy shore. The familiar sound of water meeting land greeted me, and I made my way over to a tarp on the beach, removing it to reveal a rather old, rather expensive, old handcrafted canoe that had belonged to my grandfather before me. I sucked in air, bending my knees to pull, and began dragging the canoe towards the edge of the water and into its shallows. The frigid water sent a shock up my legs and across my skin, raising gooseflesh in its wake. The wind had picked up a bit, enough so that little waves were moving across the surface of the lake. I waited, standing there in the shallows, holding the canoe steady as it bobbed on the surface until just the right little swell of water, and I raised myself up and onto the boat in as fluid a motion as I could manage, pushing off and away from the shore. As if in response, a breeze rolled across the water, carrying the sweet smell of morning air, bringing an unintentional smile to my face. I settled into the repetitive but relaxing act of rowing, alternating sides and timing my breath as I paddled forward. Another sudden breeze rocked me, rendering me unsteady for a moment before centering myself again. I frowned slightly, wondering if perhaps I'd underestimated the weather for the morning. I had elected to wear my windbreaker, but had little else on other than the swim trunks and sandals I usually wore in the water, and I was beginning to believe that would not be sufficient. As if in response to my worries, an unexpectedly strong gust of wind whipped from behind, throwing the thin hood of the windbreaker over my eyes and pushing the canoe forward nearly 20 feet. I fought to balance myself against such sudden movement, almost losing my paddle before managing to regain some level of stability. I chuckled nervously to myself, imagining how foolish I must look to any neighbor who happened to be looking outside their window right now, watching me struggle against the air. It was an embarrassing thought, and one that made me feel oddly vulnerable alone on the lake. It was that feeling that made me cast a glance back to shore. It was then that I saw the first sign that something was amiss. I'd been out on the lake for no longer than 5 minutes, and I was sure I'd seen the shore sooner than that. Still, in seemingly no time, a wall of fog that looked more like thick white smoke had descended over the neighborhood, creeping closer to the lake with every second until obscuring my view of land entirely. Perhaps the decrease in visibility triggered some animal fear in me, or something deep down inside of me understood the true nature of what was to come. But as the fog drew closer and an eerie stillness fell over the water, the seeds of panic began to take root in my mind. I quickly resolved to return to shore. Being on the water, even a lake as familiar as this, wouldn't be safe with such a lack of visibility. As the fog crept ever closer, bringing with it an unnatural silence that caused the hairs on my back to raise, I reoriented, paddling until I'd turned the canoe around in the direction I had come. By now, my home stood only as a shadow in the mist, which had now almost engulfed the entirety of the lake. I watched as the last visible bit of the dock disappeared, the fog spilling over it in a way that almost felt purposeful. I shivered, not from the cold this time, though it felt like the temperature had dropped a few degrees, but rather from the growing sensation of wrongness with the entire situation. It was then, I think, when I first heard it. Had it not been so unnaturally quiet, I probably wouldn't even have heard it over the sounds I made while rowing. But there, from somewhere in that alien fog, I could have sworn I had heard a distinct splash. I paused, staying as still as I could manage, drifting silently on the water. There was nothing for a while but the sound of a canoe floating on the water and my intentionally slowed breathing as I waited for something to break the strange silence. I waited there for what must have been minutes, met only with silence, before eventually giving up and continuing forward. Almost as soon as my paddle touched the water, the noises returned, a series of repetitive sloshing sounds coming from somewhere behind me. Confusion quickly gave way to worried realization as the noise became more apparent and less distant with each passing second, and I came to understand what I was hearing. Someone, somewhere in the strange mist that had descended on the lake, was swimming. A creeping sense of unease found itself firmly planted in my mind as I sat there for a few moments, listening to the unmistakable sound of something moving through the water. For a moment, I considered calling out, eager to know which of my neighbors could be out on the water in conditions such as the ones at hand. But the idea of calling out into the phantom mists with no real concept of who, or what, I may be calling out to, quickly faded from my mind. I instead returned to paddling, with much added fervor, in the direction I had come, to what I was sure must be the shores leading to my backyard. I don't know exactly when, but at some point, I realized I had been rowing for far too long. I was as familiar with the lake as I was my own home, and even plunged into the ghastly haze, I knew I should have reached land in any direction several minutes ago. I swallowed and tried to force down the greatest swell of fear rising within me. For every second I went with no sign of land, my movements grew more rigorous and more primal, more desperate. Come on, I pleaded with the nothingness, begging for it to part and reveal the familiar shorelines behind my home. An ancient cocktail of adrenaline and fear began searing its way through my veins, and within minutes I had started rowing with such an increased wildness that water drenched me as well as the inside of the boat. Time stretched on for a while, as did the lengths of my desperation for every second I progressed without seeing land. At some point, an idea occurred to me. One that I tried to stifle at first, but that quickly grew into something close to the irrefutable fact the longer I spent on that god-forsaken water. Somehow I knew, even blinded by the fog, I knew that I had left the lake, that I was somewhere else. I didn't want to accept it. I couldn't make sense of it. My mind fought, struggled to reject what I knew to be the truth, terror gripping my every action, driving me forward with a wild fury. I don't know how long I continued on like that. Panic made the time seem to stretch and condense into something meaningless, and with no visual aid to mark my movements, it could have been a long time. However long, it was enough time for the memory of whatever I had heard earlier to fade to the back of my mind as hysteria took hold of me. It resurfaced, racing to the forefront of my worries when again I heard it. Someone, or as I would come to find, something, could be heard moving through the water again, faster this time. My head snapped around in the direction of the sounds, my ears perking involuntarily as whatever was in the water approached, closing the distance. I froze, terror robbing me of control over my body, as I sat, eyes locked on the mist, waiting for something to break through at any moment. I had only just begun to consider that I was somewhere other than home, somewhere strange, and for some reason, the possibility of encountering something from wherever that was filled me with a fear that made my stomach turn. For several agonizing moments, the longest few of my life, fear and ignorance made my mind illogical, and my thoughts began to swim with images of unseen horrors leaping out of the mist. My chest began to burn, and I realized that I had been holding my breath. I didn't dare to stop, as the sound is closer now. So close I can feel the hair down my neck raising, and goosebumps forming along my skin. Slowly, a shadow revealed itself, a dark form emerging from the pure haze of nothingness. My heart felt ready to leave my chest as my eyes strained to create something of the approaching darkness. The sound grew slower the closer it drew, as the image in front of me grew clearer. I let out a breath, relief flooding through me, extinguishing the blazing panic that had gripped me. From the fog, the outline of a person became apparent. I chuckled, an inadvertent smile coming to my face as the realization dawns on me that I must not have been the only person out for an early morning ride on the lake. Sure, it was odd given the time of day, and I couldn't imagine how they could have gotten in without me seeing them, but nothing else made sense. Someone else was stuck out here, wherever here was, along with me. The thought gave me some semblance of comfort in a moment steeped in so much fear. It wouldn't last. The person in the mist approached slowly, their figure growing more defined by the second, and I cleared my throat to speak, hoping to dispel the last bit of fear clouding my mind. Hello? My words seemed to hang there on the air, clinging to the phantom like mist. Somehow the silence that followed seemed denser and more suffocating than before, as my anticipation for a response quickly morphed into regret at my ever having spoken. The figure in the mist continued their advance forward, silent if not for the gentle whisper of the water undertow as they grew closer. I squinted, confusion growing as the dark form in the mist grew more evident, as strange details became more apparent. As the figure closed the distance, question after question spouted in my mind, each plunging me further into a state of confusion even more mystifying than the strange fog I found myself trapped in. Closer and closer it came, and as it drew nearer, unsettling details began to leap out at me, creating an uncanny image of something I couldn't quite understand. Two, to be specific, disturbed me more than the rest. The first and least striking of the details was the strange way the figure waved at me. The motion was clunky, as if made by someone unfamiliar with their appendages, still trying to master their use. It was odd, alien, and uncomfortable, causing me to recoil away from the seemingly friendly gesture. The second and most gut-wrenching of the things I noticed was the figure's boat, or more accurately, lack thereof. It seemed to glide through the water, attached to something just below the surface beyond my vision. The water, when had it gotten so dark? The lake, usually crystal clear and beautiful, was now an inky black that resembled oil more than water. I rubbed my eyes vigorously as they were solely responsible for what I was seeing, my mind growing even more assured in my assertion that I was now somewhere else, somewhere far away. It was close. How close it was impossible to know for sure, but close enough that it became more and more evident that I was looking at something absurd, something impossible. The figure came to a stop, unnaturally abrupt, just a few feet in front of me. The tension that followed was thicker than the surrounding mist and held me more captive, as the phantom in the fog remained motionless, impossibly still on the surface of the obsidian water. We remained like that for close to a minute, locked on each other, deadlocked, seemingly awaiting the other's response. Something about its observation, about the feeling in the air around it, made my skin crawl uncontrollably. Without warning, it jerked its arm forward, gripping for me hungrily. It was enough to stir me to action. I ducked away, just barely avoiding its grasping arm, which reached far longer than anything humanly possible. In one swift motion, I swung the paddle, batting the thing's arm away before returning it to the water. I began to row away from the figure, carried forward by adrenaline and stomach-turning terror. I must have been a few yards away when I chanced to glance behind me, and my blood froze. The fog had begun to lift, just enough for me to see the figure which had appeared so human moments ago do something impossible. It descended, slowly, purposefully, beneath the black surface of the water and out of sight once more. I don't know what I had expected to see. Somewhere in the recesses of my mind, I think I had already accepted that whatever it wasn't human. Still, at that moment, confronted with the reality of the situation so suddenly, all I could think of was an escape. Of escaping that thing, the fog, and the waking nightmare that the lake had become. I don't know how long I went on for after my brush with the thing in the mist. Maybe a few hours, maybe longer. But I became extremely aware of just how tired, hungry, and cold I was. I'd been on the water for hours, much longer than I had anticipated that morning, and I had eaten a light breakfast, and not knowing when I would have access to food again seemed to only make my stomach growl louder and more frequently, so I tried to avoid the thought entirely, though I was unsuccessful, and the idea of starving to death, slowly wasting away into an unrecognizable husk in this unforgiving place, clawed at the back of my mind, slowly eating away at my thoughts, eating away at my sanity. A familiar noise somewhere off to the front of me pulled me from the border of my breaking point. It was a noise I was used to hearing out on the lake all those times. The stressed creak of the wooden dock, shifting in the moving water. I sprang up, the canoe shifting violently under my weight, the familiar sound breathing new life into spaces previously occupied by hopelessness. I hear it, closer now, the sound as familiar as ever close, but still just out of sight. I paddled desperately in the direction of the sound, in the direction of the dock that meant salvation, the return to the world I knew. I know this doesn't make sense, but the lake knew what I was trying to do, and it wasn't going to just let me. A current, some fit for a busy river, began seemingly out of nothing, and with every passing moment, the creaking of the dock grew quieter. No, you goddamn don't, I cried out at the lake, which I was now convinced somehow understood what it was doing, and was doing it on purpose. It was toying with me, and I wouldn't let it. I wasn't thinking, consumed with rage and madness like nothing I had ever experienced. I lost control. Call it insanity, desperation in reality. It was likely both, driven by a singular thought and motivation, no matter how illogical. Reach the dock. I don't know what I was thinking. I doubt I was truly thinking at all. I suppose in my mind, the dock being connected to the land represented salvation, a link between the water and the world, and the only hope in my heart that I would ever escape this place and see my home again. It was a flimsy belief at best, but I had devolved past the point of sanity and any rational decision, and belief was all it took to act. I dove from the canoe, which was immediately torn away by the strange current disappearing into the mist, as I plunged into the dark waters below. The dark water was beyond freezing, its biting cold stinging my skin to the touch, instantly making me regret my decision. It seemed the changes to the water were more than just aesthetic, and I was beginning to lose the feeling in my fingers and toes. The strange current that had taken the canoe seemed not to be affecting me though. And with a final burst of frantic energy, I managed to swim until I reached the familiar wooden structure that meant safety. As I pulled myself onto the dock, my heart sank through my chest, disappearing into the depths below. I crawled, every stir of the dock under my weight serving as a crushing confirmation of what I already knew. A scream, guttural and infuriated, tore through the air, echoing off the water and piercing the fog. It took a few seconds to realize it was coming from me. My throat was raw and my skull pounded with pain as I curled up in the center of the dock, floating uselessly in the center of this unknowably expansive sea of darkness. Now an impromptu raft, my head buried in my legs, hands tangled in my hair. I was alone. The thought rang out so loud in my head that I was certain it had been spoken aloud. I pulled myself tighter, hoping that in this illogical place, perhaps I could make myself disappear if I pulled myself close enough, my heart and mind emptying of hope. It was almost expected when I heard the faint sounds of something in the distance, swimming closer, closer. I forced myself to sit up, staring forward into the mist, which now seemed to be clearing, as a familiar figure began to emerge. I sat up, backing slowly toward the center of the dock raft, careful not to overturn it. I shivered, and I couldn't tell if it was from the freezing water or the way the feeling in the air seemed to shift with that thing's approach. The fog was fading, and some of the clarity seemed to be returning to the water, though in minimal amounts, revealing aspects of my surroundings to me. I quickly understood that the fog, the inky darkness of the water, was all protecting me, shielding me from the unimaginable reality of the situation. As the last of the mist dissipated, I felt the last bit of fight left in me drained from my body. I wasn't on the lake anymore. I didn't know if I was still on Earth anymore. The water stretched out in every direction, stopping only where it was met, but the sky, oh, that sky. The sky was a deep purple, like a bruise, dotted with stars and the 3 massive moons that hung overhead, jarring indicators to just how far I was from anything I had ever known. If not for the situation, for my utter isolation on this alien ocean, it would have been beautiful. Instead, I felt only crushing horror as my mind struggled to process my impossible new reality. A fear that coursed through my veins, filling my body like poison as the figure from the mist was revealed. It's taken me a long time to find an adequate description of the thing I saw, the thing that had been stalking me through that mist. It's taken me time combing through images of the many awful things the oceans and lakes of the world have to offer, to find something, anything like the thing I encountered in that lake. The closest thing I can compare it to is the anglerfish, the ugly thing with jagged teeth and light on its forehead that it uses to attract prey, based on some of its main characteristics. I immediately understood why the figure seemed to glide along the water without a boat, and why it moved so strangely. What I had seen was only a portion of the entire thing, a large, fleshy appendage, human in shape and size, rising upwards and out of the water from the body of something unrecognizable. Its fish-like eyes were large and dark, each the size of a dinner plate, staring into mine with an eerie intelligence I found almost as horrifying as the rest of its appearance. Other human-shaped appendages grew from all along the surface of the nightmare creature, adopting a ghostly quality in the way they move in the water, all reaching and grabbing and snatching for something. The realization dawns on me what it is they're all reaching for. Me. I can hardly focus on the ephemeral dance of the figures sprouting from the creature, and its face. Dear God, its goddamn face. I couldn't look away. Its head was broad and fish-like, with rows of molar-like teeth open and waiting to devour. It was covered in a series of growths, these grey, translucent appendages that appeared purposefully human-shaped. Thin bones ran through the thing's many limbs, responsible for their ability to somewhat articulate. The appendage that had been extending above the water, that had been made to resemble a person in the mist, reached one of its arms out at me, beckoning me forward. Somehow, the act dripped malice, and I realized it was mocking me. I stared down at the creature, the perverse horror floating just below, waiting to consume me. Its smile grew wider, and something flashed behind its glassy eyes. Somewhere inside of me, in the darkest parts of my mind, something was compelled to dive in after it. My head swam as a throbbing pain spreaded through my brain, threatening to render me unconscious. Its eyes reminded me of the ocean I was lost in, dark, with something threatening lurking beneath the surface. It was in my head, I could feel it. Somehow that thing from the depths was in my mind, dragging me into the hell below mentally. I struggled against the growing desire to let it take me, to be consumed by the beast, putting an end to it all. The thing brought its teeth together, glaring up at me with a stomach-turning smile that completely overtook the lower half of its face. The pain in my head intensified, as did the overwhelming desire to just fall in, end it. I moved forward, the dock beginning to run under my weight, threatening to flip entirely with every movement. What little sanity remained in me pleaded and screamed for me to stop, to throw myself as far away from the edge, from the abomination waiting below. It was drowned out by the invading thoughts of the creature, pulling me closer. I inched closer, its smile widened. My fingers met the frigid water first as I pulled myself forward, closer, closer. Without warning, the dock twisted under my weight, plunging me into the water. I was jolted back to awareness by the sudden burst of adrenaline, fresh terror searing through my veins as the awful realization of what was about to happen overtook me. Panic puppeteered my every move as I thrashed forward, trying desperately to reach the dock, which had again come to represent salvation. Behind me, something began to swim forward. I glanced over my shoulder and any hopes of survival were quickly quelled. The figure above the water was merely feet away, closing in rapidly. I clenched my teeth, stopping in the water, bracing myself. I was going to die on some alien ocean somewhere unthinkable. I would never know why or how I got there, and I was going to die. The thing in the water seemed aware of my thoughts, and its smile grew even wider in response, as its mouth began to hang open as the distance between us began to disappear. I closed my eyes and awaited the inevitable end. I felt the spray of water as it drew near and sucked in a final breath. The following seconds seemed to stretch on for an eternity. I waited for something, for some blinding pain or some bright light as I entered the next life. There was nothing, just the sound of the lake and my labored breathing. For several agonizing moments, I refused to open my eyes, unwilling to confront the sight of that thing again. Eventually, curiosity overcame fear, and I chanced a glance. It was stopped, utterly motionless, just feet in front of me, eerily still. I was frozen, terrified that any movement may send it back into the frenzied pursuit and lead to my death. Something about the look in the eyes of the creature, something I couldn't quite place, made me feel as though perhaps I could take the chance. Slowly, I began kicking my feet, moving back towards the dock, keeping my eyes locked on the thing. I hit my back against the wood, sending a shock down my spine that instantly gave way to relief upon the realization that I had reached the dock. I quickly pulled myself on top of it, my eyes never leaving the creature, which remained motionless under the water. The thing's smile faded so suddenly it made my heart drop, and the corner of its mouth curled into a horrible pained grimace. What it did next was the most surprising, and would come to be the most immediately foreboding. As quickly as it had appeared, the creature lowered itself into the depths and disappeared. The confusion came as suddenly as the fear had, as I watched that nightmare of a being, a predator of some alien world, disappear. I fell back, a wave of exhaustion taking the place of the adrenaline that had been keeping me going, and I began to turn and survey my surroundings. The fog had mostly cleared, something I had barely taken mental note of being occupied with the creature from before, and I had yet to actually look around me. Had I looked earlier, I would have sooner noticed why the creature had fled. Land. The only land for miles had appeared, only yards away from where I was floating now. Like so much about this situation, something felt wrong about this. For the second time on this lake, the horror quickly revealed itself to me. I thought it was my eyes at first, maybe a trick of the light in the waning fog, but I thought I had seen motion. I blinked once, praying to whatever God was out there to listen, praying for all this to stop. I think it answered. only it was the god of this place, and it was as evil as everything else here. The island was covered with dark figures, thrashing and fighting and tearing at one another in some sick, frenzied ritual. All at once, the figures stopped, ceasing their vile performance, moving as if united by one mind. All at once, they gathered on the shores of this impossible island, and I could see what they truly were. They were humanoid, bipedal, 2 arms, all of that, but they were far from human. Their skin was a sickly grey colour, with webbed hands and massive dark eyes like those on the creatures from the depths. They chittered and clicked, flooding forward off the island in droves, a descending army of angry, hungry mouths. For a few seconds before the fresh fear took hold, I wondered if these things were the result of what happened if you stayed here, lost in this place, for too long. I imagined myself, a mindless animal gnashing and tearing at the others on this island, and shuddered. I preferred death. They spilled forward, and my heart quickened in preparation for the inevitable. I would be ripped apart by these creatures, the people of the lake, and the horror of that was one I was accustomed to. But what followed I was unprepared for. It began with the water, which vibrated at first, then started to quake, waves starting to form along its surface. I had hardly noticed at first, only realizing what was going on when the creatures in the water ceased their press forward, chittering and cackling with such intensity it filled me with a dread I hadn't known I could experience as of yet. And then, it shifted. I can't explain how I felt, what it was like watching it. The mass that had been home to the creatures, the island that had appeared so suddenly, shifted. The fog had ceased its retreat, pooling around the mass in the water ominously. I glanced at the creatures in the water. They had stopped their pursuit entirely, instead collectively turning their attention towards the shifting mass, something resembling fear on their faces. Faces which I now realized very much resembled the creature I had seen earlier. Another shift, more significant than before, encouraged a series of excited shrieks and cries from the creatures, who began thrashing, hooting, and yelling in some jubilant celebration. The island begins to rise. The nightmarish cacophony from the creatures in the water rose to a fever pitch as the shadow of a behemoth stretched from the water to the sky, all under cover of that fog. The dock was lifted and thrown by a sudden wave of displaced water, tossed into the air. For a few moments, time seemed to slow. I watched the strange alien ocean descend into discordant waves as angry dark clouds poured out of the fog surrounding the colossal creature, threatening to unleash hell. I saw the legions of creatures, almost human but still somehow so different, as they watched it all unfold, unable to gauge their emotions now. I don't know how high I was thrown, but when I connected with the water, it felt like hitting pavement. A ringing sound filled my ears, which only took in a lungful of water by mistake. Disoriented, I struggled to find direction, my lungs burning as I tried to navigate my way to the surface. I managed to find my way up by some miracle, gasping for air, vision blurry. The scene that came into focus was the least explainable of all. The creatures were rising from the water, or being pulled is a more accurate description of what I saw. In a stream of bodies, thrashing and struggling against some invisible power tearing them from the lake. The behemoth had reached its full height, its hulking figure towering above the water and into the purple skies above, enveloped in that strange fog. From the highest point of the beast, where a head should have been, a brilliant light began to beam, forcing me to avert my eyes for a moment. I squinted, watching as the smaller creatures began to disappear into the light. It's hard to tell exactly, but I get the feeling their excitement was gone, replaced with fear and confusion no different than my own. They had seemed to worship the behemoth, to revere it, which left me to wonder if this thing shrouded in fog and clouds was the awful god of wherever I was. The light began to intensify, emitting a palpable heat and forcing me to look away. I didn't want to see it, to feel it rummaging through my mind like the creature from before had. The water around me had become increasingly violent. and the weather followed suit. A lightning in an array of unusual hues coloring the sky in a spectacle that was as beautiful as it was horrifying. I was tossed around, unable to avert my gaze from the behemoth. I found myself staring into the clouds above, into the light the monster emitted. I guess it's impossible to know for sure. Covered in clouds like that, you couldn't really see what it was doing. But I felt it. In my mind, I felt it. It turned and looked at me. I was covered in something like a massive spotlight blinding me, filling my mind with images of voyages taken on an alien sea. I saw crews throughout the ages, across time and space, setting sail on oceans and lakes, taking swims in rivers and creeks, on Earth and worlds I didn't recognize, all finding themselves in the same situation, lost in a storm or a strange and sudden fog, soon to find themselves stranded on an alien ocean. All meeting the same fate, one by one falling victim to unknown, impossible horrors, lost forever in this place. I could feel my mind beginning to collapse under the sheer amount of information and the images that fractured it completely. I couldn't take it anymore. I couldn't take the overload of information, listening to the screams of former victims of this place. I would rather die. I pulled away from the light of the behemoth, pulling myself towards the dark depths of the ocean. I fought against the urge to turn back, to return to the surface, fighting off the images of monsters in the depths awaiting me. Anything, even the creature from earlier with its ominous smile, was better than another moment in the shining light of the behemoth. The water began to vibrate, and somehow I heard something. A sound like a tremendous horn blowing, shaking the very fabric of the universe. I knew it was the colossal monster above. I knew what it wanted. To pull me into its light. I didn't know what would happen if it was successful, but I knew it was likely a fate worse than death. I felt it pulling at me mentally and physically, trying to tear me back to the surface. My lungs felt as though they were on fire, but I used every bit of strength I had left to drag myself closer and closer to the depths. I could feel the water rising, being pulled into the air by the behemoth, the terror of which made me only swim faster. My vision darkened with every second as I continued my swim into oblivion. Another rumble through the water. I feel myself beginning to fade as thoughts and memories of my family began to fill my mind. I was going to die. I had accepted this, but at least it would be on my own terms. I closed my eyes, feeling the last bit of my strength leave me as the instinct to take a breath took over. Then I felt it. A pull from beneath, familiar from before. A strange, inexplicable current like the one that had taken my canoe, pulling me lower. I didn't fight, and the riptide tore me down at incredible speeds, almost giving me whiplash. I was whipped around with a blinding force, at the mercy of the strange sentience behind the current. It continued on like that until slowly, the world faded away, and I opened my mouth to take in a breath. The last thing I saw as I was turned around was a light beaming from the surface, staring down at me, through me. I expected darkness, and instead was greeted by nightmares. Tumultuous dreams of being torn apart by grinning beasts and taken by ancient gods. I woke up to a bright light and instantly turned to flee, before realizing something that made me cry tears of relief. I was on land. I sat up, my eyes adjusting to the sun in the blue sky, our sun. I leaped back, feeling the cold water of the lake on my foot. I crawled away, recoiling as if from a hungry beast, and in a way, I guess I was. I rose to my feet, stumbling at first as I regained balance, before turning and running around the shore and back to the path, back to my home. Even as I finish this, I'm at war with myself about posting it, about risking sounding insane. I suppose it doesn't matter. If there's any forum that should be receptive to my experience, I imagine it's this one. Now, I don't know what to think about my experience. I'm grateful I survived, though I'm left struggling with traumas I can't possibly bring to a therapist. In the meantime, if there is anything to take from my experience, It's that if there's ever a fog in the air or a strange storm overhead, you should avoid the water. If you don't, you just might find yourself somewhere else. Every Halloween, my mum dresses up as an alien. I'm 7 years old. I'm dressed up as a witch, or at least I think I am. I'm wearing a black beanbag as a dress, holding a broom that's been cut in half, and wearing a hat far too large for my head. But I'm smiling, and I remember Dad taking the picture, his finger over the flash for at least half of them. Dad was a vampire that year. I remember because he forgot at the last minute and he had promised me he was going to dress up that year, but he didn't have a costume, so instead he improvised. The only vaguely vampiric things about his costume that night was the smudged red lipstick Mum let him use as fake blood around his mouth, his popped coat collar, and because he kept saying, "I'm going to drink your blood," every chance he got. "I should have taken more photos of your dad," Mum says, sitting next to me on the floor of their bedroom. "Dad liked to be the photographer, don't worry about it," I say, reaching for another photograph. Another Halloween photo. Did we ever miss a year? Never, Mum says, smiling at the photograph in her hand. Though your dad never put much effort into getting a costume. "Here he is," I say, picking up a photo from the box. It's a rare picture of all of us, the first year Dad bought a digital camera. I remember him being so excited about the self-timer function. He'd place it on various objects in the house and run over to me, saying, "Quick, Em, it's going to take our photo." Oh god, I remember that year. He had it in his head he was going to be a werewolf, but he came out looking more like someone who'd been to the hairdressers and not brushed the hair off. Why didn't he ever dress up as an alien, like you? In every Halloween photo, my mum is dressed up as an alien. The same exact style of alien. One I can only assume she created herself. Grey, almost incandescent painted skin. Large pupil contact lenses and long fake eyelashes that together made her eyes look like they were going to pop out of the sockets. No eyebrows, a long fake nose that drew to a point, and most terrifying of all, a simple black line to replace the lips. Mum laughed, putting the picture down and picking up another. I don't think he'd be suited to being an alien. You always did go a little full on with the alien stuff, I say. Mum dressing up as an alien for Halloween was something I'd pretty much accepted as normal until I grew up, moved out, and found out that she still did it every year. Well, why not? You've got to have a bit of freedom sometimes, Em. And that's exactly what it was. Dressing up as an alien wasn't about me or the children who came to the door trick-or-treating. It was for her, and I suppose I can't think of anything but that my mum ever did for herself. I pick up another photo. This time it's not from Halloween. It's us on holiday in Cornwall. I'm about 10 years old, sitting on a bench licking ice cream from a cone. Mum is sitting next to me, but she's not really looking at the camera. Instead, she's almost looking over at my dad taking the photo, not smiling. The more I think about it, the more I realize I never saw her happier than when it was Halloween. "Look at this one," Mum says, handing me a photo. Another Halloween, all three of us. This time I'm not dressed up at all, at the cusp of being a teenager who hates anything to do with playing along with her parents. I'm scowling in the photo. Dad is smiling. Mum looks happy, of course. Suddenly I get jolted back to a memory from one Halloween. Mum comes downstairs in her alien costume, beaming. She reaches down and kisses me on the head. I expect to smell a strong smell of body paint, but I don't. "What are you dressed up as, Mummy?" I ask. She tickles me and replies, "What are you talking about, dressed up? This is what Mummy's real skin looks like," she says and laughs. I get an uneasy feeling washing over me. Why does she have such an obsession with dressing up as an alien every year? It's not like we ever went to Halloween parties. Other than trick-or-treaters, Dad and me, we're the only ones who ever saw her in her alien costume. "I guess now Dad is gone, your alien costume is retired," I say, putting the photo back and picking up a non-Halloween one. What? If anything, I'm going to be wearing it more, seeing as I'll be here alone. Why would you wear it more? What is it about it that's so appealing to you? Mum smiles and turns to me on the bed, reaching for my hand. Her grip is firm. Maybe one day you'll understand, she says, as if the whole scenario makes perfect sense. Mum, honestly, I don't think I will. It's pretty weird. Is it like, oh God, some sort of fetish? She laughs. Don't you remember what I told you all those years ago? No? What do you mean? It's my real skin. It's not a costume, silly. Don't you get it? She says, smiling at me, her eyes unblinking. I pull my hand away from her grip and get up from the bed, the photographs on my lap falling to the floor. A strange feeling washes over me, and for a moment I think I'm going to run, but I don't. My feet stay stuck to the floor. Mum, I think this is like some sort of obsession. Maybe you need to see someone. I don't know. What did Dad ever say about all this? Your dad never asked me. He just thought I liked Halloween, I guess. Have you always done it? Or just since I was born? I guess I've always been this way, but I don't think I really found out until I was around your age. Maybe we can talk about this again when you understand. Mum, this is actually sort of scaring me, I say, picking up my keys from the bedside table. I'm gonna go now. I'll call you, I say, waiting for her reply. She doesn't say anything, just watches me, a small sort of smile on her face. I walk out of the door slowly and then find myself running down the stairs and out the front door, the keys jiggling in my hand as I fiddle to get my car key and drive away as fast as I can. Growing up, I was never really scared of Mum's alien costume. It was strange, don't get me wrong, and once I got older, I knew it was something I'd rather my friends didn't find out, but it never scared me. Somehow it just felt right, I guess, because I'd been seeing it for so long. I'm in the bathroom brushing my teeth. It's been 4 days since I ran out of Mum's house, and we haven't spoken since. I stare at my phone on the counter and think about calling her. Think about just forgetting the whole thing. Or maybe calling the doctors. But the thought of saying, my mum likes dressing up as an alien and it's starting to worry me, just seems ridiculous. I can't do it. I lean down to spit out the toothpaste in the sink and come back up too fast, my head spinning, and catch a glimpse of myself in the mirror. Grey, incandescent skin like being heated from within. Large, swollen pupils big enough I can almost see the reflection of myself in them. And that mouth. One thin black line, like a crack in between mountains leading to the bottom of the world. I hold onto the sink and breathe, close my eyes, and open again. My phone starts ringing. It's Mum. I answer, and before she speaks, I say, Mum, I think I'll join you for Halloween this year. A few weeks ago, I took a lame, blurry video of a UFO. Now I really wish I hadn't. First things first, sorry if I get too incoherent at any point here. I'm trying to bang my account of things out as fast as possible, and I'm under a lot of pressure. My headache's getting worse, but typing's making it feel better, weirdly. Feels right. So that's what I'm going to do, for as long as I'm capable, and when I'm done, I'm going to hit send. And if my internet comes back and this gets posted, then at the very least, maybe someone out there will read this and learn from my mistakes. God, my head hurts. Okay, focus. Here we go. I took that video, the one of the UFO, maybe 3 weeks ago or so. I had work off and I was having a pretty great day drinking garbage beer and fishing up at Goosehead. Goosehead's a lake, or a reservoir, I guess. You don't get many lakes in Arizona. I was packing up at dusk, and it was a cloudless day, great weather, and I had the dock all to myself. I took a second to drink it in before I stepped into my car to head home, and that was when I noticed the UFO. And when I say UFO, I really mean that literally, like unidentified flying object. because that's literally all I can figure out about it. It was an object, probably, and it was flying, and I sure as hell couldn't identify it. But it wasn't like one of those classic sources with the blinky lights and the tractor beam and the spooky techno sound effects. It was more like a single glowing shard, sitting totally still a few hundred feet up above the far end of the lake. Well, okay, still in that it wasn't moving up and down or side to side. The thing itself though, it was jittering, moving without moving. Like, maybe I'd be able to whip up a good analogy if I didn't currently feel like I had an ice pick shoved through my eye. Migraines make for real effective writer's block. The best I can think to describe it is that the UFO would be a triangle shape one moment, then a sphere the next, then a horseshoe shape, then a spiral, but it was all of those at once. Sorry if that doesn't make any sense. I'd post the video I took, but well, I don't have that anymore, obviously. I know that sounds like a cop-out, but I did take a video. My phone was low on storage, so I could only manage like 30 seconds of footage, but I got it. Didn't really do the thing justice though. Like, have you ever really tried to take a photo of the moon? You know, like one night the moon's just really, really big, and it looks so awesome in person, and you think, man, that'd make a cool wallpaper. So you snap a pic with your phone, but no matter what angle you get, or what settings you use, the moon in your photo just looks like a speck. It was like that. A cool video of a glowing speck in the sky. The UFO disappeared, just sort of blinked away after I finished filming it, and I was left with a pretty useless 20-second clip and a fun story to tell. It didn't even occur to me to send the video to the news or anything. I wasn't even really convinced I'd seen anything all that extraordinary. Like, if you told me that what I'd seen had been some sort of optical illusion, some weird interaction between the sun and the clouds, or a weather balloon, or I don't know, like swamp gas, I would have believed you. I promise, I would have. I posted the video on Instagram. That was probably a big mistake, posting it publicly, but I don't know. I felt like I'd seen something kind of special, and living in such a small town, I didn't feel comfortable bringing the video to the local news or anything. I thought, this will just be a cool little video for my friends and family. Nothing more, I swear to God. So I posted it and drove home and went to bed. I woke up to find that the video had exactly 0 likes and just as many comments. That was surprising. I mean, I'm not an influencer or anything, but I've never had a post get so little attention. More than that though, the rejection stung, so I just sort of quietly deleted the post and went on with my life. Didn't think anything of it. A week later, I'm watching TV at home and my brain sort of goes fuzzy. It was like deja vu kind of, or the feeling you get in a dream when you know what's going to happen before it does. Dream logic. The feeling settled onto me, and in a few seconds, I was up off the couch and heading to the door, as if the doorbell had just rung. It hadn't. My house was silent. But in the moment, I don't think that little detail even crossed my mind. I opened the door to find... Sorry, headache just flared real bad. Had to take a sec. I opened the door to find... I just realized I never got the guy's name. I don't know if he has one. For the sake of the story, I guess, I'll call him Tall. Because that's the very first word that came to mind. The figure standing stooped on my porch was easily the tallest man I'd ever seen. Probably close to 6'10", maybe more. I couldn't get much of a sense of what his body looked like. He was all bundled up in what had to be 3 or 4 layers of coats and sweaters. But even then I could tell that his proportions were off. His legs didn't go nearly high enough. His shoulders were too narrow. His eyes... Headache again. Tall didn't have any hair. That was the second thing that struck me about him. No eyebrows, no eyelashes. His lips weren't, lip-shaped? Like instead of the usual tapering half-moon curve most people's lips have, his were more like a perfectly uniform border of red skin, circling a tiny little slit of mouth. The only color on his otherwise white face. He smelled like antifreeze. So, okay, I noticed all of these things about him. I know I did, I remember noticing them. And I also remember a tiny, logical, terrified part of me sounding alarm bells. But all of the weird details about his body fit the dream logic that I was currently wrapped up in, and that suffocating feeling of deja vu drowned out the part of me that knew better. So, when he asked me to come inside, his voice high and reedy and all in one breath, I stepped politely back and let him in without any hesitation. He didn't take off any of his coats or his shoes. He paced directly into my kitchen and started rummaging around my cabinets until he found a cup. He started filling the cup in my sink and turned to me, his slit mouth wrangled in a sort of smile. He asked me if I knew who he was. I answered honestly and said no. He asked me if I knew why he was here. I took a bleary, hazy sort of guess and said that maybe it had something to do with the video that I took. He nodded. I asked if he was from the government and he laughed without opening his mouth. He asked me if I was scared. For some reason I couldn't figure out what that question meant, and I blinked, struggling. He nodded at that, looking satisfied, and then offered me the glass of water in his hand and told me to drink. The water was a murky grey. I don't remember seeing him add anything to it, but it clearly wasn't water anymore. When I lifted the drink to my lips to take a sip, I got a whiff of that antifreeze smell, so strong and acrid that it made my eyes water. In fact, the smell was so bad that it sort of jostled me out of my weird, almost trance, and I spasmed, dropping the glass. He didn't flinch when the cup shattered on the floor. He just squinted at me and hummed, an unexpectedly deep noise that could have meant anything. Just as suddenly as it had left, the deja vu feeling was back, and I stopped shaking. The voice in my head, the one telling me to scream or fight or run, went away, and I stared blankly at the mess on my floor. He asked me for my phone. I reached into my pocket and handed it to him. He asked me if I'd sent the video I took to the news. I told him that I was planning on it, but I hadn't yet. He asked me if I'd told anyone in person. A little spike of worry managed to pierce the fog in my brain, and I stammered, trying to keep my answer in. After what must have been 10 seconds of choking and stuttering, I said that I'd told some of my family when I'd met them for dinner that weekend. He asked who specifically and what their addresses were. Again, the fog lifted as adrenaline and fear shot through my heart. I wrestled with that answer for maybe 5 minutes, but I won out in the end. I clamped my hands over my mouth, stuffed my fingers into my tongue, and kept quiet. I don't remember him leaving. I woke up the next morning on my couch, and I quickly attributed the memory to being a weird dream. Even as I swept the broken glass from my kitchen floor and searched my house for my suddenly missing phone, I never once questioned that I'd dreamt the whole thing. I don't think I could have thought otherwise if I tried. 2 days later, I woke up to find Tall crouched next to my bed. I screamed, obviously, at the sight of his stretched out figure folded into a stooped squat at my bedside, his horrible bloodless face looming down over mine, a flask of that grey liquid in his outstretched hands, nearly to my lips. I swatted the flask out of his hand before that deja vu crept back in again, smothering my fear like a blanket. It only took a few seconds before I was just laying on my back, blinking patiently up at him. He asked me again who I had told and where they lived. I said, my father lives on Woodland. God, the migraine's making this hard. I'm going to have to stop soon. I stuffed my pillow into my mouth to keep from answering, and all of a sudden, it was dawn, and I had memories of another weird dream to keep me occupied while I cleaned up the dark grey stain on my carpet. I thought the whole ordeal was over by today. Nearly 2 weeks had passed, and I'd really truly forgotten about all of it. But then I took a step out for my lunch break at work this morning, and just as I was rounding the corner toward the parking lot, that deja vu feeling hit me like a truck, almost bowling me over. It was so strong. I froze, reeling, and a reedy voice from just behind me told me to pinch my nose closed. Unable to even begin to question the order, let alone stop myself, I did. and then it told me to turn around. I did. Then another flask was being pushed into my mouth, forcefully enough to crack against my teeth, and a plastic hard hand was grabbing at my hair, yanking my head back. All it took was one surprised, strangled gulp, and my mouth and throat were burning as that antifreeze smell became an antifreeze taste. Tall clapped one of his cold hands over my mouth until I swallowed the whole drink, and then he was gone. I didn't fall asleep this time though. No, this time I got into my car and drove straight home. Then, once the deja vu wore off and the first twinges of a headache started, I began to panic. I picked up my new phone, thinking that I should probably call an ambulance, probably get my stomach pumped before anything, but all I got was a busy signal. I tried over and over again. I tried to call the police, my dad who lives in Woodland, my mom. I tried to text someone. None of those went through. I tried to physically leave my house, to run in the direction of the town, but there are these men parked outside, these normal looking men in suits, and each time they just sort of grab me and the deja vu comes back, and I'm suddenly back inside. Finally, I figured out that although my internet's out, I have an old blog with a plugin installed that will auto-update when I make a post on a folder in my Google Docs, and I can do that in offline mode. I've made it this far, and although my vision's blotting with pain and my head's completely on fire, I haven't been knocked out yet. So at the moment, I think my best course of action is to post this publicly, to tell the nice man where my family lives, to hopefully get the word out about what's going on, about where I am, to maybe get some help. Please, anyone who reads this, my name is Todd Jacobs. You can find my address. My father lives on Woodland and my sister lives on Dr. Street. My mother lives on Canyon Ave. Please don't hurt them. I love them. They're the only ones that told this, I swear. And phone number in the about section of the blog. Please, if anyone can come find me and take me to the hospital, I really think I need to go. And if on the way you see a light in the sky, for the love of God, don't even look at it. I feel like my head's going to explode. For this next story, I'd like to give a shout out to the absolute legend Lighthouse Horror for allowing me to use his story. For more of his work, definitely go check out his YouTube channel, also found at Lighthouse Horror. And now to the story. An alien ship landed in my town, and everyone is acting like it didn't. Running over to the dining room window, I called back over my shoulder. "What is it, Dad?" My father dropped the fork he was holding, spilling a glass of red wine onto his newest work shirt. He didn't even notice. "Jesus Christ," he said, losing his cool for a brief moment. "I don't know." He stood next to me as we watched the yellowish blur rapidly change directions above our town. It looked like some kind of ship. "Where'd it go?" my dad whispered. "There," I yelled. Our town was located along a 6-mile-long lake, and we watched in awe as the bright object zigzagged rapidly from one corner to the other at speeds that even a child could tell were impossible. My father took out his cell phone, more in a state of shock than calmness, and dialed. Having been a deputy up until last year, he had the number memorized. "Sheriff, this is Doug Turner." My father paused, still watching the light dance around the dark sky above. "Sheriff, look up." There was more silence then, as I assumed the sheriff was as confused, and perhaps afraid, as we were. My father hung up and looked back over at me. "He's going to make some calls. Says it's probably just someone testing out a new drone." The ominous yellow light turned dark then, a moment after looking to have landed near Williams Ranch at the east corner of town. "Come on, you gotta get some rest for school," my father said. I think he tried to hide what he was really feeling. He forced a smile as the phone rang again. "This is Doug." "Yes, sir. Give me about 20 minutes. My father looked over at me, and for a second I thought I saw fear on his face. He pushed it aside. "Come on, let's get you to bed." He tucked me in and kissed me on the forehead. Before I could tell him to be careful, He tried his best to ease my worries. "Don't worry, I'm sure it's nothing. Sheriff says he's bringing 3 or 4 others along." He winked. "Whatever it is, I'll be careful." And then he was gone, leaving the light on near my bed and closing the front door with a click. I was home alone, but no one in the town ever worried about such things as burglars or worse. At least, not yet. I don't know how I fell asleep, but all I can tell you is I woke up the next morning with a terrible headache. My father hadn't come home. Clutching my head tightly, I still managed to run to the kitchen and was surprised to see him waiting for me at the table. "Good morning, son." I looked over at him with confusion, as he made no attempt to go over the previous night. "What was it, Dad?" His blank expression held. "What was what, son?" I became more confused. "The yellow light, the thing in the sky that you and the sheriff went to check?" "I think you must have had a nightmare, son," he replied firmly. And then he stood up from the table and smiled. It didn't ease my fear, only enhanced it, as the smile turned into a grin far wider than I was accustomed to. "Say, you know what? I've been thinking that maybe you can take the day off school today. Maybe we can go for a little field trip." Yeah, sure," I replied uneasily. "Do you mind if I rest a little first, though? I've got a really bad headache." His smile deflated a little at that, as he seemed to be thinking it over. A moment later, it came back in full force. "Sure thing. Get some rest and we'll head out around noon. I've got something to show you." He kissed me on the forehead as he had the night before, but this time it was awkward, and it made me feel, well, scared. Going back to my room, I shut the bedroom door behind me and pressed my head into the pillow to try to dull the pain. How could he not remember last night? Was it actually possible I had dreamt the whole thing? As I stood and looked out the window, though, thoughts from the previous night rushed back. I remembered details that I had somehow forgotten. I hadn't fallen asleep as my father had gone to check out the strange sighting with the sheriff. I had instead sat by the window and watched. I can't remember everything, but I now know that I saw something. 20 minutes or so after my father had left to meet the sheriff, there was a blinding flash of light that emanated from where we had seen the object land. It flickered yellow, then red, then a silverish green that I can't even put into words. After that, the memories stop. I don't recall falling asleep, and I definitely don't remember my father returning that night. I don't know what is going on, but I'm scared as hell as I wonder about his plans for today. Why am I so afraid? I love my father. I trust my father. Yet I can't help but keep thinking of the unreal colors and amazing flashes of light that I'm somehow certain were from some type of ship. I've never seen anything move that fast before. My intuition yells out to me that it's not from this world, and that I have every reason to be afraid of what's to come. I don't know what's going to happen later today, but one thought keeps replaying itself over and over in my head. I keep thinking that if my father and I go up to William's ranch, that I'm not going to make it back. Part 2. My headache grew worse, perhaps due to my anxiety of what the rest of the day might hold. My brain thought of what my father planned to show me and where we might go. I'm ashamed that one thought was more prevalent than the others. Is he even still my father? I'm not sure how much time passed before the door creaked open slowly and I opened my eyes to see him grinning over at me. "It's time," he said quietly. My eyes met his, and before I could tell him how my headache had gotten worse or think of some other excuse to stay home, he continued, "Don't worry, once we get there you'll feel a lot better, I promise." I nodded. Perhaps a different day I would have had the willpower to argue, or to think through the events of the previous night with more clarity, but not in my current condition. The pounding in my head felt like a jackhammer hard at work inside my skull, and was so intense now that I could barely open my eyes, let alone argue. He helped me to his old red pickup truck, gave me a pillow to press my head against, and then closed the door behind me. The engine of the old Ford started up easily, and I drifted in and out of sleep as he put the car in drive and made his way down the long road into town. Opening my eyes for a moment, A bright patch of pine trees could be seen out my window. I saw a family of deer as well, their eyes seeming to focus on me as we made our way into town. Maybe it was my mind playing tricks on me, but for a moment I thought that I saw a sadness in their faces. They almost looked worried, but not for themselves. When we got into town, it was unlike anything I had ever seen. My friends and family were there, as if they had been waiting for me. Their eyes were so cheerful and joyous that they seemed to almost glow, and as we drove further through the town square, each of them smiled from ear to ear as we passed by. Every single person in town waved, almost in unison. "They're happy to see you," my father said, chuckling. "Where are we going, Dad?" Before my eyelids fell again from the pain, I saw him look over at me and wink for the second time that day. "We're going to where it all begins." I must have fallen asleep then, because the next thing I knew I was standing in an open field of lavender that must have been William's ranch. The sun wasn't as bright as it had been while we had driven, and strangely enough my headache was almost completely gone now. "You ready?" my father asked, and I noticed then that his eyes weren't the calm brown I had known before, but now some type of silver. "Ready for what?" I asked. "Ready to see it," he said, holding that same grin and stepping aside. On the ground behind him lay a circular silver disc, maybe only a few feet wide. I found it almost unimaginable that such a small object could have been responsible for the blinding display we had seen the previous night. "That's it?" I asked. My father nodded. "Go closer," he said. I shuddered, the first time since awakening, feeling a surge of fear make its way through my body. "I don't want—" "Go closer," he interrupted, his tone changing only slightly towards anger, and perhaps impatience. I don't know where to, but maybe I would have run then, far away from this place and far away from the dream of it all, yet right then the people around us came into view. Every friend and family member I knew stood in a circle around us. They didn't say a word, but their intentions were clear enough. They were waiting. I understood then that I was the last. "Don't be afraid, son," my father said then. "You'll understand in a moment." I knew then that I didn't have much choice in the matter, and though beyond terrified, I began to walk past my father and towards the small silver object ahead of me. The strange thing was, the closer I got, the less small it seemed. At first, I had noted it to be roughly only a few feet in diameter. Now, as I approached the object, it seemed to go on for miles. How was that even possible? As it loomed just in front of my gaze, I began to understand my father's words. This object wasn't a craft or an alien ship, it was so much more. The thing began to show me what it would bring to our world. There would be no more fighting and no more war, and there would be no more sickness and no more pain. There would be no more death. Still, there was something frightening, I realized, hidden below its smooth surface. Something dark, something wrong, and something— "You're the last in our town," my father continued. "Go ahead, son, reach out." His eyes were darker then, yet they somehow glowed, and it seemed like I was just an observer in some terrible nightmare. I saw my hand reach out, crossing the bridge between worlds. Touching the silver object that seemed to go on forever, I suddenly understood everything. In the span of an instant, the 12-year-old boy I had been was dead, and in that same moment, I understood completely why my father and the other townspeople had been smiling. Of course they should be smiling. I began to smile too. No more pain, no more death, no more war. Well, that's not completely true. There would be one more war, in fact. It would be the war to end all wars. I smiled wider as all the others had, understanding now that I would be on the winning side.